Welcome back to the lecture on the Constitution. I left off talking about the Constitution of 1869. While there were some negative things that it did, there were also some important things that the Constitution of 1869 did. It established an immigration bureau. It established no fee granting of homesteads to settlers. What this meant was that the counties or the state could not charge you for the homestead right. They could not charge you for this protection offered under the Constitution. It authorized the legislature to prohibit the sale of liquor, alcohol, near colleges. The exception is unless the college was located in the county seat. It forbade the legislature to authorize lotteries or grant divorces. However, one of the most important things the Constitution of 1869 did was it created what we now know as mineral rights. It assigned mineral rights to landowners. This is important because when you go and you buy property, you buy land, you're buying the land and everything above it. If you purchase the mineral rights, you are also getting everything above the ground and also everything below the ground. Why would this be important? Think about it. Where are you going to find gas and oil? Mineral rights is what allows you to sell your gas, your oil, anything that may be located on your property for a profit. Okay, that should finish up the Constitution of 1869. Remember, the Constitution of 1869 was passed. The Democrats were unhappy. They felt that it was forced upon them. So in 1872, when the Democrats regained control of state government, we elect Richard Koch as governor. We got rid of E.J. Davis. We decided we're going to rewrite the Constitution. We're going to fix what the Republicans, we were going to fix what was wrong with this old Constitution. Oh, I should have set this up correctly to begin with. There we go. This leads us to the Constitution of 1876. In 1875, a convention was called to rectify the shortcomings or the perceived shortcomings of the 1869 Constitution, and each delegate was selected by popular vote. 40 delegates were members of the Grange, 75 were Democrats, and only 15 were Republicans. 6 of the members were African American. These framers agreed on a constitution that had 4 major things. The first thing was strong popular control of state government. This meant that the governor's appointment powers were limited and that public officials, such as judges, would be subject to election by a white male electorate. We were trying to limit the power of state government. We had just gone through an abusive couple of years under the Constitution of 1869. We were trying to fix it so this did not occur again. We saw this new Constitution and that it limited state governmental power. Executive powers, so the governor's powers, would be diffused among several executive office holders. He had to now share his power with other members of the executive branch. The legislature would only be part-time and would meet biannually. So they meet every other year. Legislators' salaries were lowered. The judicial branch would be elected rather than appointed. And finally, government actions were limited by the Constitution. Economy and government. The Constitution restricted the extent to which state government could tax and incur debt. Limits were placed on office holders' salaries. Also, compulsory education was eliminated, so the requirement that students go to school was eliminated, and education was decentralized so that white landowners did not pay for the education of African American students. The promotion of agrarian interest. Reflecting the presence of farmers and grange members at the convention, this new constitution included provisions protecting homesteads and regulating banks and railroads. So thanks to the grange, remember I talked about them, we see that the farmers find themselves on higher political ground, or they find themselves on more equal footing with business. And finally, it's important to note that the 1876 Constitution was a painstakingly detailed and rigid document that placed many restrictions on the government. In that sense, it was a significant departure from previous Texas constitutions, as well as the U.S. Constitution. The Texas Constitution today. The United States Constitution was designed to create a strong central government that would nevertheless be restrained and non-tyrannical. This means that the U.S. Constitution is brief and allows for a great deal of flexibility. It is comprised of 7 short articles, and our U.S. Constitution has only been amended 27 times and is a total of 8 pages long. The Texas Constitution, on the other hand, was written to limit government authority, and it does so without any thoughts towards effective government. Since this was the mindset with what it was written with, the reason it was written, remember it was a very reactionary document. We were upset with the Republicans at the national level. We felt that we had been abused by Republicans in the state government, particularly E.J. Davis. We are reacting to these actions. We want to limit what government can do. So with this mindset, we see that our new Constitution, the Constitution of 1876, contains 16 articles. It has become one of the longest articles that have ever been written. It has become one of the most amended constitutions. It has been amended 467 times as of 2009. Only 3 other state constitutions have been amended more, and these states are South Carolina, California, and Alabama. So what we need to know about this current Texas Constitution, the Constitution of 1876, it was a reactionary document. It is in the top 4 for length and number of amendments. The goal of this new Constitution, and I say new, you have to realize that the current Texas Constitution is still the Texas Constitution of 1876. We have not created a new Constitution since then. The goal of the Texas Constitution was to create a very limited government. We were trying to prevent excessive governmental power that could be used against the people. So let's look at the Constitution of 1876, or in other words, our current Constitution. We have a preamble. It is very brief and invokes the blessings of Almighty God. Article 1, we have a Bill of Rights. The Texas Constitution has a Bill of Rights in Article 1 so as to limit political power and prevent the abuse of political power. Article 1 indicates that all free men have equal rights and cannot be denied or abridged because of sex, race, color, creed, or national origin. Freedom of religion, speech, and the press is guaranteed. Individuals are protected from unreasonable searches and seizures, excessive bail, bills of attainder, ex post facto laws, and double jeopardy. It guarantees the right of trial by jury and the right to bear arms, regulated by the legislature. This article promotes the right to a republican government. Article 1 also contains provisions with concrete public policy implications. For example, Article 1, Section 26 forbids monopolies that conflict with public interest. There's a general agreement among historians, and this is actually kind of neat, that the Texas Bill of Rights and other provisions found in the Texas Constitution guarantee the average citizen a greater variety of protection than most other state constitutions. What we find in our Constitution, if you look at the U.S. Constitution, yes, we have protections there. However, the U.S. Constitution provides what we call a floor. They provide what is a bare minimum. What we find in the Texas Constitution is it goes above and beyond the minimum. It goes above and beyond what the U.S. Constitution says we have to have. The U.S. Constitution actually grants us more freedoms, more protections than the minimum found in the Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution. Article 2, the powers of government. Article 2 divides the government into three distinct branches of government. Once again, this is going to be executive, legislative, judicial. There is one exception to this, and this is going to be the lieutenant governor. This is because of the role he plays in the Texas Senate. Texans embrace separation of powers, which means there must be cooperation in the decision-making process between the institutions, between the three branches. Article 3 creates our legislative department. So it creates and puts the legislative power into two chambers. We have the Senate and the House of Representatives. I'll discuss these two branches in the next chapter or at a later date. Article 3 also provides the manner of election of our legislatures. And we see that in Article 3 that Texas is much more restrictive when compared to most states with respect to our legislative salaries and our sessions. Texas salaries are among the lowest in the nation, and Texas is only one of 5 states that has biannual legislative sessions that meet only every 2 years. Article 4, the Executive Department. Our Constitution divides the Executive Department into 6 distinct offices. 5 of these are elected. Our Constitution limits the Chief Executive's directive authority. This means they have very limited authority to issue binding orders. And they limit his or her budgetary power. They can only recommend a budget to the legislature. However, this Constitution does give the Texas governor the power to veto legislation. We also see the power of line item veto. Texas is one of the few states which does not have gubernatorial term limits, gubernatorial means governor. Term limits means you can only run so often. In Texas, we don't have term limits for our state officials, for our state legislatures. You can run as often as you want. Article 5, the Judicial Department. Article 5 discusses the court system. It creates our justice system and provides for the lower courts. It allows the legislature to create other courts as needed. Finally, Article 5 discusses the court's jurisdiction, compensation of judges, how much they're paid, and election of judges. Article 6, suffrage. This article states who may vote in Texas and how to conduct elections and registrations. Other than filling elected office, voters can only decide directly. We can only vote directly on 3 other matters: constitutional amendments, legislative salaries, and the idea or the decision if we're going to have a state income tax. Article 7 deems public schools necessary to promote a Republican government. It declares the legislature's obligation to maintain, and this is in quotations, this is directly out of our Constitution, an efficient system of public free schools. It also provides for the creation of a state board of education. Article 7 discusses in detail elementary, secondary, and university education operations. Now, I want to go back to this quote that the legislature must maintain an efficient system of public free schools. What does it mean when we say that the legislature has an obligation to maintain an efficient system of public free schools? This argument has been used to refer to the funding of our school system. One of the things that is normally cut during harsh economic times, is the funding for education. The school districts will turn around and they will sue the state, they will sue the legislature and say they are failing under Article 7 to maintain an efficient system of public free schools because the states or the legislature is not providing enough money. Normally, the court will side with the school district, and they will agree, yes, that the school districts need more money and the state needs to come up with a better way how they justify giving the school districts the amount of money they do. What the court is not doing is they are not solving the problem. They are not coming up with a formula saying the state must follow this formula to meet this legality, to meet this responsibility. All the court will say is yes, they're either doing it or no, they're not. And if they say no, they're not, they leave it up to the legislature to figure out how to fix the issue. Article 8, Taxation and Revenue. This article grants the Texas legislature the power to tax individual and business income. However, it exists, but we don't do it. We do not necessarily have, or we don't have, an individual income tax. However, and remember, this is one of the things that we could vote on, one of the 3 things we could directly vote on. Article 8 stipulates that revenue garnered from an income tax must either be dedicated to education, so it must be used for schools, for education, or else it must be dedicated to tax relief. If we pass an income tax and we're not going to use it for education, we must reduce the tax intake, we must reduce the tax rates somewhere else. Articles 9 and 11 deal with local government. They discuss in detail the creation, organization, and operation of counties and municipal or city corporations. Article 5, 7, 8, and 14. Excuse me. I don't know what I was doing. Article 10, 12, 13, and 14. Remember I said that this is our current Constitution and it was written in 1876? Maybe we need to reconsider. There might be some of the stuff in here we don't need anymore. I am going to go over these articles, and one of them I believe is just a tad bit outdated. Please see if you can figure out which one it is. Article 10 deals with railroads. Do we need railroads? Yeah, I think we need railroads. I'm okay with Article 10. Article 12 deals with private corporations, deals with businesses. Do we have private corporations in Texas? Yeah, we're good here. Article 13 deals with Spanish-Mexican land titles. At this point, all of these issues have probably been dealt with. We could probably get rid of this portion of our Constitution. Finally, Article 14 deals with public lands. Article 15 deals with impeachment. It explains there must be a formal charge by the House of Representatives and a trial by the Senate. The Senate has the power to try all executive and judicial officers. So this power of impeachment is the same impeachment power, the same process that we find in the U.S. Constitution. Article 16 is a general provisions article. This is just a catch-all article. It grapples with several issues ranging from oaths, community property, and stock laws, to banking corporations and more. This is just where we find everything else. We eventually added Article 17, and this tells us how we're going to amend the Constitution. This explains how we can amend or change our state constitution. It is a four-step process. Number one, the Texas legislature proposes the amendment. Number two, the amendment must be approved by a 2/3 vote in both houses, in both chambers. Number three, an amendment and explanatory statement must be published in each recognized newspaper of the state, so the big major newspapers. Once these three steps are met, we go to step 4. Amendments are then voted on, and they must be approved by the majority of state voters. So only after these 3 steps are taken do we, the people of Texas, have a chance to vote to amend our Constitution. The Texas Constitution has been amended many times since 1876, but it has never been completely rewritten. There were a couple of efforts that we're going to discuss. The first was Sharpstown and the failed 1974 constitutional reform. In the early 1970s, we had a bribery scandal that hit Texas government. In regards to this, or in response to this, a group of reform-minded Democrats were elected to office. A constitutional amendment allowing the legislature to sit as a constitutional convention was ratified by the voters, and in 1974 the convention met to draft a new constitution. So we the voters approved, we said that this next legislative session could act as a constitutional convention. They could try to write a new constitution for us. However, we had problems. It's the same problems we have today. What happened was a highly mobilized interest made compromise impossible, and the 2/3 vote necessary to approve the Constitution failed. What I mean by this is we would have special interest groups. They would contact legislatures and they would say, we want this. Another special interest group would contact another group of legislators and we want this. A third group of special interest groups would contact a third group of legislators and say, we want this. At the end, these interest groups worked against each other. They could not compromise, they could not agree, and our Texas legislature could not get the 2/3 votes needed to pass this new constitution that would have allowed the state of Texas, the people of Texas, to vote on this new constitution. In 1975, legislators attempted to rewrite the Constitution through the normal amendment process, but the voters rejected the proposed amendments. The next time we had some sort of effort was the 1999 Ratliff-Juneau proposal. In 1999, Bill Ratliff and Rob Juneau proposed a new constitution that would have given the governor additional appointment powers and reduced the number of elected executives, officials, and judges. The legislature would have remained a part-time legislature. The length of legislators' terms would have increased, but the new Constitution would also have imposed term limits. The proposal itself did not pass. It also could not get 2/3 of the legislative vote to pass out of the Texas legislature into the people. So basically what this means is today the only way we have to change the Constitution to fix the issues that we see are amendments. Is this good or bad? I mean, do we need to rewrite the whole Constitution, or can we just piecemeal it together? I've had students say, if it's working, why change everything? Why not just go ahead and amend it? That question's a personal choice. But I will tell you, in 2011, voters were asked to consider 10 proposed constitutional amendments. 7 of these constitutional amendments passed. Most of the 2011 amendments were uncontroversial. The ones that were considered controversial were opposed by the Tea Party and other anti-tax groups, and they did not want to increase the tax burden on Texans. For example, Proposition 4 would have expanded the ability of counties to issue bonds to finance the development of unproductive areas, where those bonds would be paid with increases in property taxes. Proposition 7 would have given El Paso new borrowing authority. Proposition 8 would have given property owners the opportunity to opt out of agricultural or wildlife conservation property tax exemptions in favor of water conservation property tax exemptions. The Tea Party movement saw this as shifting the tax burden from one group to another, and this is why they opposed it. And that's fine, and that's not my point. The point is, if we are going to use constitutional amendments to change our Constitution, to try and correct issues, it's actual voting. These numbers I'm talking about, or this year I'm talking, these 10 amendments where 7 of them passed from 2011. Do you know that only 5.2% of registered voters actually voted in that election statewide? And this is the issue that people have with using amendments. 5 to 6% of Texans are taking the time out to vote, but it's these 5 or 6% of Texans that are making the decisions for every Texan out there because we refuse to vote. That's why there's some question. Yes, if we piecemeal it, if we amend it, are we letting a very small portion of Texans dictate the future of our state?